Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Dbacks podcast, Arizona's #1 baseball and beverage podcast. I'm your host, GP Diamondback, and today we are at the end of the year. The Diamondbacks have not clinched a postseason berth, somewhat disappointingly, and this is going to be the wrap-up of the season podcast. That's recording it a little earlier than, of course, we had all hoped. We'd hoped to have at least made that wildcard series that's currently taking place in Milwaukee. That's between the Brewers and the Mets instead. But, things are as they are, and at the end of the day, I owe you guys a podcast. So let's go and have a look at what's happened over the last couple of weeks. Like I just said, the Dbacks season is over. They won 2 of their final 6, and they left their fate in the hands of the Mets and the Braves, who perhaps controversially split a 2-game series, and then they both advanced to the postseason, with the Diamondbacks finding themselves below the cut line. That really stings. Obviously, MLB played all of these games, or was supposed to have played all of these final games all together on Sunday to avoid scenarios in which teams can, just play out a score knowing that they'll both be safe for the postseason. But obviously with things that's been going on with the hurricane that's affecting a lot of the Americans, southeast and eastern seaboard, obviously that wasn't possible. It wouldn't have been safe to, have 80,000 fans in the area for a baseball game. So I'm not going to say what happened shouldn't have happened, but it sucks that the Diamondbacks are just sitting there in the clubhouse or going to PHNX Guy Fieri downtown in Phoenix and watching the game instead of, having their fate in their own hands. So as I sit here and I watch the wildcard series highlights from Game 1 in Milwaukee, I find myself really lamenting what could have been and wondering really where we went wrong. And it's not that difficult of a question to answer at the end of the day. We were good this season, just this year has been crazy in Major League Baseball. I think our kind of record this year would have easily been enough for the postseason, I think 4 times out of the last 5 years. And this year has just been mad, especially the NL West has been an insanely competitive division. No disrespect to the Rockies, but they took 2 out of 3 games from us, which in that final series, and they got their act together, and I think they really put on a party as Charlie Blackmon, Rockies legend, of course, who I affectionately call Mountain Man because of the fact that nobody looks like they should be playing baseball in Colorado more than that dude. Has finally announced their retirement, and I think they've had a great year. So congrats to them on a wonderful career, and all the best for him in the future. But we're not here to talk about legends of the Colorado Rockies. We're here to talk about the Diamondbacks, and obviously we struggled against the Giants in the NL West. We had a bit of a rough time, obviously, against the Padres. Our final series was against the Padres, and we needed a couple of wins there. We got one on the final day thanks to pretty much Ketel Marte single-handedly. And then obviously we didn't really come close to putting up a fight against the Dodgers more times than I would care to admit. So yeah, it's been a rough division, and then we've really struggled, especially on the road this year. Chase Field was still quite good as a home base for the Diamondbacks, although sometimes we'd absolutely put up the flattest of pancake performances and let teams trample all over us. But a lot of that, I don't think, is solely to be placed just on the players sucking. I think there's been a bit of a weird atmosphere of over-expectation around the Diamondbacks as a baseball team this year. And of course, we've had those injury woes. Who knows what would have happened if, Ketel Marte hadn't been injured at the time when he did, and then sort of brought back perhaps a bit too quick and re-injured himself. Who knows what could have been if that hadn't been the case, At the time, it was starting to get into, the big MVP shouts for the National League. It was sort of between him, Francisco Lindor over at the Mets, and then, of course, Shohei Ohtani, who, everyone keeps losing their mind over. But I think delivering what Shohei does in that Dodgers team is not hard. When you have Betts and Freeman on base ahead of you, it's easy to be like, oh my god, RBI, RBI, RBI. Of course, he's a good hitter. At the end of the day, he's a good DH, but I think his record of stealing bases is mostly down to apathy from other teams. They don't care if Shohei steals from first to second very much, because they're more worried about striking out the guy who's at bat to stop the run being driven in. Somebody like the likes of Gavin Lux. You can go after some of these Dodgers if the big three are on base or the big three have hit a 1 or 2 run home run. So I think that 50-50, and maybe if he reaches 60-60 through the postseason, of course it's an impressive feat and everyone's going to be like, wow, Shohei Ohtani. But people are going to forget very quickly just how good of a season Ketel Marte had. And he's a guy who we can hope will be part of the Diamondbacks roster for the long-term future. He's one of the key cogs in this Diamondbacks puzzle. So I think we got to do everything we can to keep him here longer term. I don't think there's too much risk of losing him this year. But when it comes to injury woes, we've had obviously pitchers go down at different times. Zach Gallen, Merrill Kelly have spent time on the sidelines. Brandon Pfaadt had a rough one. Ryan Nelson got injured. We didn't even see 2 of our supposedly 5 starting pitchers acquired in the offseason until halfway through the year with Jordan Montgomery and Eduardo Rodriguez. Those guys were supposed to be key pieces of the puzzle as well, and we didn't see them for 20, 30 games. And when you're trying to build together a starting rotation and you've got guys like Scott McGuff, Joe Manaply working as openers before you bring in a bulk bullpen guy, that's not going to cut it. Even if it's not in the business end of the season, you're still dropping games that you shouldn't be dropping. And we obviously did a good job at the trade deadline. We balanced it out. We brought in AJ Puck, who has been immense, and I think keep him here for the long term. He'll be fine. But then obviously you had struggles with guys like Paul Sewald, who was our elite closer last year in the postseason. He wasn't the elite closer this season. Everyone started saying, "Oh no, it's drop that. It's time for Paul Sewald to pitch. It's meatball time." And I think maybe with a bit of reconstruction through the rest of the year, he could have been fine, but didn't quite cut it. And then a news broke today. Kevin Ginkel, who's one of our big put out the fire bullpen arms, apparently he's been pitching with a fractured leg since June. So that's 4 months of baseball that one of your more popular and more intimidating bullpen guys who can come out and really get on top of a team, have a shutdown 1-2 innings. He's not been pitching entirely fit for 4 months, and that's just crazy to me. I realize we don't have too many other options. You started to, you went and got Dylan Floro, and he got DFA'd in a couple of weeks. Yilba Diaz has been up and down between AAA quite a lot, and of course Justin Martinez is now the new makeshift closer. Whether or not he'll keep that role next year or not, we shall see. But man, that's tough to hear. And then what happens next? That's the real big question. So I mentioned Paul Sewald a minute ago. He's elected free agency with the MLB, and that's the same as Josh Bell, Kevin Newman, and then a couple other guys who got DFA'd fairly early on. So of course we wish them well. Bell and Newman have both done a pretty good job for the kind of thing they were asked to do. Newman is a second base / shortstop cover. He did okay whenever he was asked to play. He probably wasn't going to get very much time with Geraldo Perdomo coming back and obviously being the key cog in the machine that Torey Lovello thinks Geraldo Perdomo needs to be. And of course we see that on the pitch. He's a big clubhouse guy. He's the guy who does a lot of the translation for the Hispanic and Spanish-speaking dudes out there. He kind of links all that together. He's very vocal out in the diamond, organizing stuff, and usually he also ends up being the guy that gets mic'd up quite a lot. And I wish these broadcasts would just leave him alone and let him do his job. But yeah, I don't think Kevin Newman was going to get much of a look in next year if Geraldo Perdomo was fit. And then of course you're going to have Blaise Alexander likely to be your backup shortstop, your number 2 guy. It'll be between Blaise Alexander and Jordan Lawler, I think, for that spot. I think the fact that Blaise can potentially play second or third base and Lawler isn't as versatile might push it in Blaise's favor, but we'll have to see how some of the complex league games turn out, because neither of those guys are going to the fall league this year. But we wish them luck. And then Josh Bell, of course, did a fantastic job as the backup for Christian Walker. Christian Walker's obviously an elite bat and a key part of our mechanisms. He's somebody who's likely to depart this year, so I think that'll be a tough one to take. The rumors are that the Dodgers and the Astros are both circling, looking at Christian Walker as a bat to add to their lineup, and that's going to be a hard one to take. But he's really the guy who's going to be the biggest departure from the Diamondbacks this offseason, if rumors are to be believed. I'd love to see us come back with a big offer to keep him, but some people are also saying if he goes, who's going to play first base if Josh Bell's also departing? And the rumor mill's in full swing on that one. Silly season has well and truly begun, and people are saying, does this pave a way for Paul Goldschmidt to come back? And as much as I'd love to see that, I love Paul Goldschmidt. Obviously, we know how much of a terrific servant he was for the Diamondbacks, something of an iconic figure. You got Cardinals fans coming into the Diamondbacks subreddit and saying, well, this might happen, but he's not what he was 4 years ago. He's not what he was, even 2 years ago. He's kind of just, obviously he's a future Hall of Famer. I don't think there's too much debate about that, but would he be, the solid bat you need to replace Christian Walker, similar to the way of we had our third base woes at the start of the year before Eugenio Suarez really got hot? Would Paul Goldschmidt make the kind of impact that Christian Walker does on a game when he's in form? And that's a good question. The Diamondbacks have had some cool stats in their favor this year. They've been very much more selective with what they swing at, and I think Goldschmidt, could bed in quite well. I think the atmosphere of being back in Arizona, somewhere he said he kind of treats still as his baseball home. I believe he doesn't have a place here anymore. I have a friend who lives in Phoenix who was talking about, real estate, Goldschmidt's house, yada yada, what happened when he departed. So I don't think he has a place in Phoenix anymore, but, when you're paid the kind of money that baseball players are, I don't think that would be a huge issue. But would he, find that form because he was back playing baseball somewhere he was happier? And no slanders to St. Louis and the Cardinals, they're a historic team. They've had some great players throughout the years. Would Goldschmidt, be better playing for us than he would playing for them next year if he were to get that starting first base spot? That's the sort of questions that, need to be asked here. But I mentioned third base as well as a situation in Eugenio Suarez, and he is one of the guys that the Diamondbacks hold options to extend on. It's along with Merrill Kelly, Jock Peterson, and Randall Grichuk are the players that the Diamondbacks hold an option for at the moment. Suarez, I think, is pretty much a no-brainer. He'll be offered an extension. I think he'll probably take it. He seems happy here. He's forged a good connection in the clubhouse with a lot of guys, and of course, I panned him at the start of the year. He's really turned his year around, been one of our best bats, got that crazy RBI record as well, so I think we'll see him stay. Merrill Kelly, don't quite know what's going to happen there. I think he thinks he's one of our aces. We think he's one of the aces. We'll clearly offer him a good compensation package to stay. I don't know that much about Merrill, his personal life, whether or not he wants to, move for a fresh challenge. Obviously, he was somebody that we acquired from the KBO as well, so he's not been through the whole MLB free agency trade process before. as he sort of disappeared from the MLB radar for a while and kind of revived his career pitching in Korea. I'm sorry if my accent makes those two things sound like the same word. And yeah, I think unless we go and trade for, somebody like a Luke Weaver, a Corbin Burns, I don't think you'll see Merrill Kelly go anywhere unless something really crazy happens. Jock Peterson, of course, he's been insane as our lefty DH. He's given an interview saying he'd like to stay, so I think Mike Hazen's going to go, just put the number in front of him, get him to sign the piece of paper. And then Randall Grichuk, who's been the right-handed guy in the DH platoon, has done a fine job. I think he's maybe had to play a little less than he might have expected. I think he was expecting to be the DH against all righties, and instead we've used that DH spot in a number of interesting ways where Ketel Marte's played there when he's coming back from injury. Then, of course, Lourdes Gurriel Jr. has played there as well as part of his injury recovery when he was out. You just basically shoved anybody there as like the DH to, get them in games, get them at bats, help them recover, which, is a fairly common practice around the MLB. But whether or not, that's going to impact whether or not Randall Grichuk wants to stay or not remains to be seen. I think he's done a fine job. It's hard for me to think off the top of my head of who you could get in who would be happy with being a DH, but also not playing a tremendous amount of games. Grichuk, of course, played in the outfield a few times as well, did a solid job at right field when, we pushed Corbin into the center and had to think about that. I think the competition in the outfield is absolutely crazy for the Diamondbacks, and it's going to, just get crazier next year. You think about your starting three is likely going to be Lourdes Gurriel Jr., one of Jake McCarthy or Alec Thomas, and then Corbin Carroll. And then, of course, how much fondness there is for Pavin Smith from Torey Lovello as well. Like, Pavin Smith's done fine in this final month of the season, but he's I think I mentioned this when he hit that grand slam walk-off a few weeks ago. Like, he doesn't do that throughout the year. He does it like once or twice every season. He's not, a fantastically productive bat that you can always have in your lineup throughout the year. I think he's another guy who's been deployed as the DH a few more times than maybe some Diamondbacks fans would have liked to have seen them in that role. So, yeah, what happens with Grichuk if Pavin Smith's going to be the backup right fielder / DH? I don't know. If, he's moving on to different pastures after, a pretty terrific career, fair play to him. I think he's one of those guys who you could see pop up, kind of anywhere in the NL West again. I don't know what the situation over at the Giants is when it comes to their outfield, but he might be somebody we see go there. And then other departures, Dylan Flores already been DFA'd. Luis Guillaume sort of came in, covered second base, did a job, obviously kind of popular with Mets fans. He won't be coming back, so we've got to say thank you to him. Thank you to all the guys who were part of this Diamondbacks season, like some Jace Peterson as well, like people who disappeared somewhat at the start of the year. Because there's the possibility that some of these relations could turn really hostile. Like, it's been rough these past couple of weeks hearing about, the likes of Nick Ahmed, David Peralta really railing on the Diamondbacks as ex-players. You don't like to hear that, and you got to accept, yes, we are a slightly different kind of team. We don't always fill the stadium, although we get fantastic fan base attendance when the Valley really rallies around the Dbacks and has something to fight for. I think we're actually up there in terms of atmosphere and noise compared to a lot of other teams. It's just that regular season bulk load when through the summer Phoenix is really quiet and before half the snowbirds arrive. What goes on there? Do we need to work on, the mentioned plans when it comes to Chase Field coming out of, the front office's press statements at the moment? Is Chase Field going to lose some of its capacity in the upper deck there? They're going to convert it into other things like, hotels, entertainment areas, things like that, which would be cool. It would feel more packed in the seating areas if you did that, and then obviously you had the option to change that if you reach the postseason, add some more seats, add some more capacity, that sort of thing. Don't see any problem with that. Whether or not Chase Field is going to be the long-term home of the Diamondbacks or not, with the weird tit-for-tat back and forth that's going on with the city and the lease and the county at the moment, I'm not going to weigh in on that. I don't know very much about American civic law or anything else like that, so I'm not going to touch that with a 10-foot pole. I'm just going to focus on what we do know. And what I do know is 2025 could be a bit of a rebuild for the Diamondbacks, at least in the first third of the season. There's going to be a lot more cut and shift and swipe and move than I think they're expecting. People are saying, well, Christian Walker's going to be only like guaranteed big departure. Every other key piece of the puzzle is still there. But that's true. But whether or not every piece of the puzzle is going to be able to deliver the way we expect them to will always remain to be seen. Take a swig of my tea here and let's consider our options. What's this Diamondbacks team going to look like? Corbin Carroll, is he going to be the Corbin we all saw last year? He's starting to recapture glimpses of that this year, but there was a guy doing the rounds on Reddit and on Twitter and saying, I'm posting Corbin Carroll highlights every day until he reaches a 250 batting average, and I don't think he got there by the end of the year. So is that guy going to post a Corbin Carroll highlight every single day of the off-season until we get started and see what happens with Corbin Carroll's average next year? We shall see. Is he going to perform the way we know he can? Remains to be seen. Ketel Marte, I'm fairly unconcerned about. He'll be a guy who'll make the difference. Geraldo Perdomo, never been the most productive bat, but is always useful when he's facing a pitcher, draws a lot of walks, has some very intelligent at-bats. Jock Peterson, hopefully he comes back. Eugenio Suarez, hopefully he comes back. Like, we're basing a lot of this on, well, I hope this, I hope that. And while it's probably 70-80% likelihood that some of these players are going to sign extensions and sign new contracts with Mike Hazen in the Diamondbacks, there's going to be big departures too. Like, you think about the guys who were supposed to be a big part of this Diamondbacks team this year. So Eugenio Suarez spent first 3 months of the season ice cold. We didn't see Erod for half the year. Jordan Montgomery obviously kind of signed late, had that awful deal with what happened in his spring training, didn't get a full spring training, had a shocking deal, fired his representation. He's somebody who's absolutely going to be kicked to the curb, and everybody we've heard from the Diamondbacks organization in the end-of-year press conferences has said, yeah, Montgomery, he's got to be gone, and I agree with him. So we potentially need a new starter guy in the rotation, maybe even two starter guys in the rotation, if we're not certain that somebody like Ryan Nelson is going to be in there longer term. And that brings your attention towards the Fall League. So when it comes to Diamondbacks prospects in the Fall League, you're going to have, bats like, Tommy Troy, Gino Groover, they're going to be on display. But then pitching, the likes of Yu-Min Lin and Dylan Ray both are headed to the Fall League. So at least we have something to look forward to through the rest of October. Like, we have something we can look at and say, hey, if you don't want to watch, the Mets and the Brewers and the Braves all play their postseason games and feel the stab of pain in your heart that that's not the Diamondbacks, go watch some of the Dbacks prospects at the Fall League. I've had fun at the Fall League. The one time I got to visit last year, I was at the final game for the championship in the Fall League, and that was an absolute blast. So get yourselves down there, support some of the Diamondbacks prospects, and let's get those scouting reports coming in on these guys, because last couple of podcasts I've said Yu-Min Lin, he's somebody that obviously we're placing a lot of hopes on in terms of both being a popular guy that will bring in some of the Asian tourists, but then also, can he be a kind of arm that we need in a very different style? Like, his mechanics are something that's really special if you watch highlights of him over on YouTube. So let's wrap this podcast up. At the end line, we won 89 games. That's 5 more than last year and would have comfortably got you a postseason berth in most MLB NL West regular seasons in the past few years. But at the end of the day, we should have dealt with our fate ourselves. Dropping the amounts of games that we did in the final third allowed us to get into the position where we were no longer in control of our own destiny. And circumstances outside of our control, including a hurricane, means the Mets and the Braves sort of decided that for us. And it should never have got to that position. The kind of blowing 8 runs at the Brewers 2 weeks ago. It's the sort of thing that never should happen to a team that's chasing the postseason. So you got to think about, can we iron out that kind of catastrophe, collapse, mental fragility next year? Can we start the season with 100% fit starting lineup? Can we do our work in making sure that the backup guys are going to stay fit? Like, are we going to lose, somebody like Gabby Moreno? If so, can we work on getting Adrian Del Castillo as a better defensive catcher as opposed to just an insanely hot bat? Things like that appear obvious to most people who've watched the Diamondbacks this season, but, still require a lot of work to make happen. But with that said, I'm going to thank you guys for listening to the Dbacks podcast throughout this season. I will be back in January when we start to get a lot of trade rumors flying around. I'll be covering all of the rumors, all of the roster moves that the Diamondbacks are going to be making in next year's season. Thank you very much for listening this year. It's been a joy to create this content for you guys, and I appreciate all of the support we've had. Please remember to follow us over on Twitter and Instagram at Dbacks Podcast. Subscribe wherever you're listening to the podcast, so YouTube, SoundCloud, Spotify, Apple, wherever it is you're listening. Please remember to give us a follow. It always helps us to know how many guys are watching and what you guys want to hear. Please feel free to send us your thoughts. Thank you very much for listening this year, and I will see you in 2025.